Hi, this is Deborah Clutter. I have a new pattern for you today, and this is going to be a full quilt pattern. Not a full-size quilt pattern, but this will be for a twin-size quilt, and here's what the pattern looks like. And I think this pattern is really a nice pattern to use for fabric that you don't want to cut up into little pieces. So if you have some fabric you want to showcase, this is a great pattern for that. And it's really simple to make, and the blocks are really big, so it doesn't take very much. Let's get started. I have to put on my glasses. So the fabric I am going to use, I need two different kinds of fabric for this particular pattern. Now you can make this pattern with a bunch of different colors. So I have made it with 11 different colors using fat quarters. And so that's an option too if you want to do that. And I think I do have that in the pattern. And sorry about the lighting. So this option right here is for 11 different fat quarters if you want to do something like that, if you just want random colors. And then I also showed the king size. I didn't show the queen size, but I just ran out of room. So you're going to need 1.5 yards of two different kinds of fabric. And these are the fabrics I'm going to be using. This is the fabric I had designed. A postcard fabric I designed for the farmer's daughter in Hill City, South Dakota. And Lorena, who owns the shop, had it printed on Art Gallery Fabrics. Now, if you want some of this fabric, you can call her shop, and I'm sure she will send you some. So just tell her you want the postcard fabric, and that was custom made, and she'll probably know what you're talking about. She has a website, The Farmer's Daughter, Hill City, South Dakota. So go there if you want some of this fabric. The other fabric I'm going to be using is I printed it on spoon flower. So this is something I designed and printed on spoon flower, and it says Black Hills in it. And then the third fabric, you're going to need 3 yards of this for your background. And this is Moda Grunge, and it's kind of an off-white with a little bit of gray. All right, let's get started cutting. So just kind of want to line it up on the edge or however you normally cut things. But we need to cut it to 16.5 inches. And here we go. So this should give you 4 blocks out of this 16.5 inches. So you're going to need 11 blocks of the one color and 10 blocks of the other color. So you just have to decide which one. Okay, so I have all 3 cuts done. So this will give me a little bit more than I need, but we can start with that. And so you could either line them up and cut them. I'm just going to cut mine one by one. And I just want to make sure that this line at the top is straight. So line up my ruler and get a straight edge here. And then these need to be 10 inches wide. And like I said, we should be able to get 4 out of with the fabric. Okay, so there's 2 blocks. I know you can't see my whole mat, but trust me. And there's 4 blocks. So 4 blocks out of the 16.5 inch with the fabric. I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting the rest of these. So I just noticed something. My buffalo are kind of sideways. So if you have some directional fabric that you're wanting to go a certain way, then make sure instead of cutting at 16, you would have to cut it at 10. But then you're only going to get maybe three of them out of with the fabric. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like this because I don't really care, but if you do care, then you're just going to have to cut it the other way. Okay, so all of my main fabric is cut. So I have 11 of these, and I have 10 of the other color. And now I'm going to cut my main fabric, which is the background fabric. So I am just going to cut these to 5 inches. And like I said, if you have an AccuQuilt die, you'll have to cut them to about 5.5 and then put them on your die. All right, so you are going to need 42 5-inch squares. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting all of those. All right, I finished all my 5-inch squares, and I have 42 of those, and I'll just put those aside. And I cut a couple of 9-inch by width fabric, because we're going to cut the sashing that needs to go in between the blocks, and it is 2.5-inch sashing, but I'm going to use my AccuQuilt die for that. Now I did find with this new die I had to buy that if I put it all the way up to the line up here, it doesn't cut very well. So I had to make another line down a little bit. And you know, it wasn't like that on my last die. I actually only needed them to be 8 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of those that I need for the sashing. So here's all my 2.5-inch strips for my sashing. And then I need to cut them down to 10 inches. And then you're going to cut 14 10-inch pieces from those 13 strips, and then the rest of them are going to be for the row sashings. I'm just going to stack them up. I have 3 of them stacked, and they're folded in half, and then I'm going to cut them to 10 inches. And you should cut as many as you feel comfortable cutting. If you don't feel comfortable cutting that many, then you know, just cut 1 strip. All our sashing is done. So I need 6 row sashings that are 52.5 inches. So I'm going to sew the remaining 2.5-inch strips together. Now you can choose to take them to the sewing machine and do this kind of thing, just like you're going to make binding, and then sew like this. But you do want to sew it in a diagonal instead of just sewing a straight seam. It always looks better. I'm going to actually use this little tool. It's called a folded corner clipper. And I'm going to clip my corners with this. And it just makes it easier. I don't have to cut the fabric after I join it together, so just have to sew a 1/4-inch seam. So I actually found this tool to be pretty useful. Didn't know if I was going to use it, but now I can just take it to my sewing machine and I can just sew it like that at a 1/4-inch, and then it makes a nice mitered edge. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all of those and cut the rest that I have and get ready for sewing. So I'm at the sewing machine and I need to draw a line on all 42 pieces of my 5-inch squares. We're going to use the 5-inch squares on our blocks, and we're going to put them on the block here and sew from this corner to this corner. I have all my squares marked, and I know it's kind of a pain to mark 42 squares, but it actually works out better if you do that. I just take my blocks that I'm going to be working on and I put them in my lap. All of these need to have the corner or the squares in the upper left and the lower right. So you want to make sure you do them all exactly the same. If you do not, then you will have a different looking pattern, because that did happen to me one time, because I've made this quilt 3 times. And one time, the first time I made it, I actually messed up and I sewed them all exactly the same, and it definitely looks a lot different. So we're just going to sew on the line that we drew, and this is called a stitch and flip. So you can choose to do, all one corner on all the blocks and then come back and do the other one. And then once you're done, you're going to fold these back and iron them. And then you'll trim this to 1/4 of an inch. Make sure you flip it back before you trim it, because you don't want to accidentally trim it and then you will not have the right amount of fabric if you trim your corner off. And this is a little bit dull, so I just used my add 1/4 ruler because I can kind of see where the line is. That worked pretty good. And then we can just take it and iron it down. So I'm going to go ahead and do all 11 of these, and then I'll come back and then we'll do the next ones. And the next block is just going to be the opposite of what you did on that block. So you're going to put one of these in the lower left and one in the upper right. And then do the same thing. Sew 1/4 inch, or not 1/4 inch, sew on the line you made. And then do the opposite corner. So your box should look like this, and it will be the exact opposite of this block. After you get all your blocks done, lay your quilt out somewhere. My design wall is not big enough for this quilt, so I've laid it on the bed. And then you're going to start sewing your rows together, just like you laid it out. And I went ahead and cut all my sashing to 52.5 inches. So after you sew it together on the diagonal, and I just sewed them end to end because I like the seam to be in different places. I don't want it to be in the same place. And then I cut all my sashing, and so now I'm ready to sew my rows together, and then we'll be finished. All right, I'm getting ready to quilt this, and I have chose to use a green thread, and we'll see how it goes. I think it'll look fine. The pattern I'm using is called Whispering Pines, and you can get it on Urban Elements. I hope you like this project. You can find the pattern in the description. There's a link that goes to my website. You can also find other patterns on the website on the download page, and there's some embroidery patterns and quilt patterns and quilt blocks. Don't forget to check out The Farmer's Daughter in Hill City, South Dakota, and contact them if you'd like some of this fabric that I use in this quilt.